It's 100% true that the minute you make a decision, you are killing off a life that could have existed. You are closing an infinite number of doors so you can leave one door open that you're going to walk through. Instead of framing it as, oh God, I have to close off all these doors, you're going to close off some of them anyway. It's kind of a reclaiming of the agency of who gets to decide which doors I close? Because if I just stay on the path that I'm on, randomness gets to decide which doors I close, whereas I get to decide.
That's Dr. Mark Schrime. He is a surgeon, a researcher, a speaker, and the author of the book Solving for Why. And today we're talking about decision-making and ADHD. Why did we make the decision to do a whole episode on decisions? The answer is simple. Making decisions can be difficult in the best of circumstances, but when you layer on ADHD-specific challenges like executive functioning and time perception, decision-making can get even more difficult. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sorry I Missed This, the show where we talk about all things ADHD, sex, intimacy, relationship, communication, and more. As always, it's me, your host, Kate Osborne. Y'all, I am so excited for this episode. I first came across Dr. Mark's work a couple of years ago when I read about his work in decision-making and how our brains and our bodies and our values all combine to inform the decisions that we make. I've always struggled with making big decisions, and what is fascinating about Mark's work is that he doesn't just focus on whether or not a decision is right or wrong, but his work focuses on why we make those decisions and how we gather the data and the information that we need to make the best possible decision. Dr. Mark is so knowledgeable, his research is incredible, his book is amazing, and so I am so excited to welcome you to this decision-making episode of Sorry I Missed This. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Kate, thanks for having me. I've been excited for this one.
I would love to just know right off the bat, how does one become a decision-making scientist?
Yeah, so there is actually a field called decision science. I did not make this up. Fundamentally, every decision, but especially the big ones, are a balance of competing demands. So that's what decision science does, is it takes all sorts of competing domains that people are trying to balance in their heads and makes it pretty explicit for how to balance that.
I'm fascinated around the connection between ADHD and decision-making. A lot of ADHD decision-making difficulty is not about knowledge, it's not about motivation, but it often is about cognitive overload. So in like high stakes, health settings, how do medical professionals like you, how do they deliberately reduce your cognitive load so you know that better decisions can happen? And can we steal from that?
Let me start by saying decisions are hard. So yes, I 100% think it's harder for ADHD folks. And the fundamental reason that we struggle with them is that every decision is made under uncertainty. But if there wasn't uncertainty, you wouldn't have to make a decision. There's some really cool science on this. Our bodies react physiologically to uncertainty as stress. Our brains come up with a whole bunch of shortcuts, a whole bunch of heuristics, a whole bunch of ways to make decisions that don't necessarily make us have to face that uncertainty. So that's just broadly, that's not ADHD related at all. I do think one of the things that happens with the really hard decisions, let's say I'm changing a career. So one of the things that I need to answer is, okay, what am I hoping this new career does for me? But then there's a whole bunch of like, okay, so what are the PhD programs that I have available for me? And then, how am I going to afford it? And so you go from the why to the what to the how. And one of the problems that all of us face, but I do think is harder for folks with ADHD, is bouncing between those levels. So We'll start with like, I think I want to get a PhD because X. Oh crap, but hold on, how am I going to what's my budget? How am I going to do this? I can't do it because my budget doesn't work. And so we just we bounce between these levels, and that prevents us making a decision at all. And then it really makes it harder to make a good decision.
You talk a lot about values and how values shape the decisions that we make. And something that I think is super interesting and that we have seen over and over and over on this podcast is that at the core of everything is being able to articulate your needs, articulate your wants. And I'm curious about how understanding our values and how unexamined values can shape the decisions that we make.
When I was talking about the levels of decision making, that's the top level of decision making. What is it that you're trying to actually accomplish? And I use the word values, and I still think it's the best word, but it's got a connotation that those values have to be good, in quotes. If you're trying to figure out where you want to direct your midlife, it is okay for your value to be, I want to make a crap ton of money so I can retire at 53. And we can solve for that. But articulate that. Because if you don't articulate that and you port the values that you had as an idealistic 18-year-old who didn't have 3 children and a mortgage to pay and whatever, you will make a decision based on values that aren't actually yours. And then you'll be dissatisfied. You will have made the wrong decision because you weren't solving for the thing that you truly wanted to solve for.
A lot of times I hear, as a person with ADHD, like, slow down, think it through. But what I have found is that sometimes making decisions is actually more difficult the longer I give myself, because I'm entering into that sort of like rumination cycle. Shout out to Dr. J in the other episode that we just did. But that sort of rumination cycle and the overthinking, and now I'm over researching and I'm like using all my cognitive effort to, find the perfect, I don't know, piece of information or whatever that is going to inform this like very, I don't want to say vibes-based choice, but sometimes decisions there's not like one perfect choice. There's just a choice that you make, and then you have to just sort of live with it, right?
You've said so many good things in here. First of all, absolutely, rumination is a thing. And again, because decisions are made under uncertainty, we as humans have a few different ways to handle the uncertainty. The most common way to handle the uncertainty is to try to reduce it, which is natural, but if we're constantly trying to reduce the uncertainty until we get to certainty, we will never act. We're trained as health professionals to like be 95% certain before we tell you, okay, it's time for your surgery. And that's good, because that's what I think I would want my doctor to do for me. On the other hand, for our own careers, for our own lives, I really try to encourage people to keep the 70% rule in mind. That you only need to be 70% certain. Like, you can be 30% uncertain. You can be like, yeah, this might actually mess up, and to accept it. Because the other thing that you said is that there's never a perfect decision. What we're trying to do here is find the good decision that optimizes for all the things that you're trying to solve for. And then making that decision with 70% certainty. And also, and this is a really hard thing, trusting yourself that you can handle whatever comes on the other side of that.
The ADHD experience, like so many people who I talk to, I interact with on a daily basis, talk about the fact that they feel chronically bad at decision making, but we are all making decisions every day, right? And it's like, what do I have for breakfast is a decision. It's a smaller and perhaps less significant decision than like, should I leave my job and go get a PhD? But like, we're still making it. And so as someone with ADHD who also works with clients and is, like in the medical field, like, why do you think so many people with ADHD just feel inept at decision-making, parentheses, general?
I think it's because we're looking for the perfect decision, and I don't have any science to back up what I'm about to say. This is just experiential. We are maybe particularly afraid of regret. Barry Schwartzworth, this very famous book, I want to say it was 2004, called The Paradox of Choice. And in it, he proposed, and the research has supported this, that the more options you have, the more likely you are to be paralyzed with a choice. And I call this the Cheesecake Factory menu. Like, the Cheesecake Factory menu is 45,000 pages long. It's so hard to make a decision. Whereas you go to a restaurant and they give you 3 options, well, I mean, that's pretty easy to make a decision. And there's a really interesting corollary, and I forget the names of the researchers that looked at this. They presented 2 groups of people with choices. One of them had, I forget, like 3 options, and one of them had 15 options. Even if they picked the same thing, the people that had 15 options were less satisfied than the people that had 3.
That makes me so mad, and I don't know why, but I'm like, I would also be mad. I would also be like, I bet there was like one of those was way better than what I picked.
And it's something called expectation disconfirmation, which is that if I have 15 choices, well, there probably is a perfect one. And when the Caesar salad, I don't know, has too many croutons in it, you're like, well, dang it, this was not the perfect one. There was probably a better one. So to back this up to ADHD, it is often a much better exercise to cut out options. To say, all right, Kay, you got two options. You're going to stay in your job or you're going to get your PhD. We're not going to be like, you're going to stay in your job, you're going to get your PhD, you're going to, I don't know, learn to surf, you're going to.
But I wanted that one.
Exactly. And part of that is just kind of surgically trimming off some of those options so that the decision actually does start to get to the thing that you're trying to solve for.
I remember thinking about this very specifically when I was choosing where I went to college, is that I often feel like Doctor Strange from Marvel, right? Where I see before me like 1,000 potential realities in which I could live, right? In which I could exist. And it's like, do I choose the reality where I go to, the college in Iowa or the college in New York or the college in Florida or the college in England? And all of those are going to then create new things, right? Because I'm going to meet new people and have different opportunities and different things happen to me in each of those places that is then going to inform the rest of my life. And that is how I've always thought about decisions is do I go for the PhD? And even if I do get the PhD, maybe I'll get another one down the line because I also think art history is very interesting and very cool. And I would like to know more about that. How do you navigate that sort of like I'm just going to call it the Dr. Strangean quandary of really feeling like no matter what I do, there's like an entire lived existence that I am letting go of whenever I make the choice, because I could be an art historian, but I could also keep working in neurodivergency and sexuality. And both of them are fulfilling and fantastic. But like, there's part of me that just like wonders about like Kate, the art historian. Do you know what I mean? Maybe?
I 100% know what you mean by this. And yes, like I would love for it to be true that we have multiple lives because there are multiple lives that I want to live. It's 100% true that the minute you make a decision, you are killing off a life that could have existed, and you are choosing not to go down that path. You are closing an infinite number of doors so you can leave one door open that you're going to walk through. That is 100% true, and there's really no getting around that. I do think where that paralyzes us, though, is that we're like, well, dang it, like, maybe I should have gone to art history, or maybe I shouldn't make this decision and then go get my PhD in art history. And then we don't actually close the doors. We don't actually walk through the door. And that is a decision. Like choosing not to decide is a decision. So you're still closing off doors. I think instead of framing it as, oh God, I have to close off all these doors, you're going to close off some of them anyway. It's your choice which ones you close off right now. It's kind of a reclaiming of the agency of who gets to decide which doors I close. Because if I just stay on the path that I'm on, the randomness gets to decide which doors I close, whereas I get to decide if I make the decision. There's another concept in decision theory. It's the idea of type 1 and type 2 decisions. One of them is permanent. Like, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Type 1 decisions have to be made very slowly. They are permanent. Just you have to make them deliberately and think through them. Type 2 decisions should be made quickly. They should be made with 70% information. We as humans, and I do think even more so in ADHD, tend to view more decisions as permanent than we should. There are actually very, very, very few truly permanent decisions. So as you just said, you could go for your PhD right now, and then you could be like, well, no, maybe, you know what? I do want to get a PhD in art history later. And you haven't fully closed off the art history door until the day you die.
Because so many ADHDers do tend to struggle with that kind of like black and white thinking of there's a right choice, there's a wrong choice, right? Is there a way that, or like a tool or a way of thinking about decisions that can help someone kind of decide what is a tier 1, what is a tier 2 decision, and sort of like not feel like choosing the chicken Caesar salad is like the type 1 decision where we really have to
think about
like
it.
If I know we're going out to eat, I look up the restaurant during the day and I spend all day thinking about my options. And so then that way, when I go to the restaurant, I'm like, I know what I want already. And I feel like that's like the secret third option.
I don't know of a very simple tool, but what I do encourage folks to do is to practice messing up.
Oh, we love messing up here on the show.
Yes.
We love messing up.
We are so used to this, like, well, the road to success is paved with a lot of failure, whatever, whatever. I actually try to encourage folks to go a little bit further than that and to actually fall in love with the kind of sucky feeling of making a bad decision. Don't do this with the really big decisions. Start with the small ones and see what happens on the other side of that.
That's like the cocktail menu theory is sometimes you just order the cocktail that you're like, it seems a little weird. It seems a little outside of my comfort zone. And then you get it and you try it and you're like, oh, maybe it's not for me. But like you don't die and nobody explodes. It's just the drink has too much vinegar in it.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about impulsivity. There's like the micro and then there's the macro. And sometimes the impulsive decision making is just you impulsively decide to like go out with friends. And so you don't go to the store at the time that you normally do. And then your dog is out of dog food, right? And so now you've like impacted yourself down the line. But sometimes the impulsive decision making is like insidiously macro, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes like, I don't know why like now I'm stuck on this like cocktail thing, but like sometimes the impulsivity is just you look at the menu and there's a drink with a fun name and you're like, oh, that sounds fun. And you impulsively order it.
Yep.
But in particular, in the work that I do, that those impulsive decisions can be much more life-changing. We see women with ADHD making impulsive sexual decisions.
Yeah.
Decisions that can impact their sexual health and even like the trajectory of their life moving forward.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about impulsivity.
Before I get to talking about impulsivity, I will though say, yes, it's annoying that you have to now go to the store at 10 o'clock at night to get dog food for your dog, but you've survived every other one. I'm being oversimplification, but to a large degree, you've survived every one of those other.
Survived, yeah.
You have so far survived, and the chances are that you and your dog are going to survive again. So I think what we do often is that we catastrophize, we black and white. We put too much importance on the consequences of the impulsivity. And again, sometimes they're incredibly important, especially in the field in which you work. So I don't want to minimize that. But in the smaller ones, sometimes we put too much importance on that and ignore the fact that we have lived with our impulsive selves for, our entire lives. And we have built up systems and structures to take that into account. But where I want to go with the impulsivity is I think there are a couple of questions that we have to ask ourselves. If you'll excuse a little bit of vulgarity here, I think the very first question we have to ask ourselves is this a situation in which it's okay to think with my dick? Because sometimes
that's a fair thing.
It is. And sometimes the answer to that is yes. This situation is safe enough. The people that I'm around with are safe enough, in which case, go for it. The second thing that I would say is this a domain in which your gut instinct is actually well developed? As a physician, there are times that I will walk into a patient's room and just know that that patient is not going to do well. And after 25 years of being a physician, I would not be showing up as my full self if I ignored that intuition. But I cannot port that intuition into, day trading stocks, because I have the intuition of a ficus tree when it comes to like what a stock is going to do. So like, be honest with your own intuition and say, is this a domain in which my intuition has been honed? In which case, listen to that, but also be careful, because expertise in one area actually sometimes blinds you to your lack of expertise in a different area.
For our dear listeners who are maybe people who are struggling with decisions or are doing that overanalysis or stuck in that decision paralysis moment, do you have some concrete pieces of advice, just like a little something that you can leave them with to hopefully spur them into this like next part of their journey?
Concrete pieces of advice for all decision making.
For every single decision that will ever be made. No pressure.
I think a lot of things that we've been talking about this whole episode, it's there. Like, you give yourself permission to fail. In fact, practice failing. Give yourself permission to think with your id sometimes when it's okay. Give yourself permission to bring in your intuition. All those sorts of things I think are really helpful. At the risk of sounding like a self-promoter, I do think sometimes you need to get a mentor too. Like, I think you need somebody who is able to see it externally, call you out on your patterns. So get somebody not emotionally invested to help navigate these decisions.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for having this chat. This was such a great episode.
Thanks for having me. This was great.